Conversations with GIPR, which is the stock symbol for Generation Income Properties, is the only podcast hosted by a CEO of a public net lease REIT. While there is plenty of information and analytical data to help you understand the net lease REIT sector, I take a look at what it takes to grow a company and ask our guests some of the tough questions on how they did the same. If you're interested in learning more about just what you can find in a spreadsheet, Conversations with GIPR may be for you.
David Sobelman is the CEO for Generation Income Properties. All opinions expressed by David or any guest of Conversations with GIPR are solely opinions and do not reflect the opinions of the company. Any remarks in this podcast, other than purely historical information, may include forward-looking statements and as such are subject to the risks and uncertainties that are discussed in our SEC filings, and actual results may vary materially from those suggested in any forward-looking statements. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions.
First, a word from our sponsor, Sierra Lima Bravo Properties. When a company owns their real estate and can't get a loan, who should you call? Sierra Lima Bravo. The professionals at Sierra Lima Bravo will advise you on how to structure a net lease transaction from the most dire of companies, mainly in the face of adversity. Sierra Lima Bravo, the one stop for the last stop on the road of promised long-term income. Today's guest comes to us from the great state of New York. And he's immigrated to Florida. And we're very appreciative and glad to have someone of his stature here in our midst. We've been friends and colleagues for about 5 years. And he has a true startup story. So I can't wait to get into this. I think our listeners will be interested in what he's accomplished without an office and literally without anyone on his staff, even though he has many contractors, people kind of surrounding him. It's just him. He floats around a co-working space on a daily basis and manages to hijack the same corner of the office with about 68% success rate annualized, right? Which is really high. I've been impressed with that. He's currently building some of the most interesting projects in Tampa. Please help me welcome Craig Bazarsky of BendinRoad Development.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
Honor to be here. Thank you for that intro. Wow.
Yeah, that sounds like a very contrived appreciation for that.
It was a little contrived. No, it is an honor to be here.
That's the standard response. Happy to be here.
Happy to be here, Dave. Robotic.
That's right. So BendinRoad Development is BendinRoad is one word.
Yeah,
and
BendinRoad is one
and
word.
So were you an English major?
No, far from an English major. The name, there is a story behind the name.
It's there's a bend in the road.
There it is. And there's the story.
No? Okay.
You took it from me. Okay.
All right.
No, there is a story.
All right.
The house I grew up on, I grew up in Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, you did?
In Newport, yeah.
Oh, but I met you when you lived in New York.
I lived in New York for 6 years, but first 18 years I was in Newport.
Okay.
And a long time ago, Newport did not have addresses. So it wouldn't be, a number and then a street name. It would just be a name of a house. So I grew up on a house that was on a bend in a road, and it was BendinRoad. So if you wanted to send a piece of letter to my house, you'd say BendinRoad, Newport, Rhode Island. And that was it. So
wait, were you the only house on that road?
We were the only house with a bend in the road. The only house on the bend in the road.
Is that a true story?
Oh yeah, no, that's true. So that's how I got the name.
When did that change to an actual address?
I mean, I would guess 50 years ago.
Oh, okay.
This is not while I was living there.
Oh.
But there still is. We have a gate, and there still is a plaque that says BendinRoad on the gate. So,
was there a telephone there?
Was there what?
A telephone?
To get in? No, the gate served no purpose. You could just walk around. It was just like a fake stone little high gate. not actually for protection.
That's great. Okay, so now I feel like dumber than usual because there's actual like a deep meaning.
Very
behind it.
deep,
Yeah.
very deep. Yeah.
And so the singular way or singular word to find your home address 50 years ago was that one word, BendinRoad.
Exactly. That's it. BendinRoad, Newport, Rhode Island, and mail will be delivered to our house.
Is it the same house like that your relatives lived in?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, I didn't live there.
Okay.
My parents bought it. I'm 34 years ago.
Okay. That's neat. I love that story. That's great. And now, do you have neighbors now? Do they have neighbors?
Do they? Yeah, they have neighbors.
Right.
Yeah.
So you needed an actual number, right?
Exactly.
Right.
I think as it became more populated.
All right. Good. I'm really interested in your educational background because we're going to get into like what you do for a living. But I think it's really important for people to see that you took a track that is not traveled regularly. And so you got a taste of the South in undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
Went to Emory. Right. So that was a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're leaving kind of the confines of the Northeast, which is traditionally a little bit more refined
True.
than us Southerners, right?
Yeah.
And you tell your parents, I'm going to Georgia.
Correct.
How did that conversation go?
It went well.
Yeah.
It honestly went well. My uncle lives there. My cousins live there.
Uh-huh.
So I had been going to Atlanta for, probably once every other year.
Uh-huh.
But Emory was a school. I mean, I applied. I never visited before I applied. I got in. And then I was like, I should probably go and see, the school. So I went in and just fell in love with it. I mean, it was a beautiful campus. And
Right.
I knew it was a great school educationally. So that was it. So I went there and then I got a bachelor's in business administration. So basically an undergrad business degree there.
Right. Good. Any concentrations or just general?
Yes, real estate and then finance for the two
Okay.
concentrations.
So you kind of teed it up a little bit. Right?
A little. Yeah.
You have like a cursory overview of like what a spreadsheet is.
Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. Yes. Very cursory
Right.
overview.
All right, good. But then you choose a different path after that.
Yes. So then I go to law school at Villanova.
Right.
So spend 3 years there. I work in Philly at a law firm, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith.
No, you're getting too far ahead.
Okay.
All right.
Stop at the law school.
Right. You graduate, you go to law school. Why?
I go to law school. I mean, honestly, I come from a family of lawyers, and it just seemed like a natural step in, getting to wherever I wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing more deep than that. Like I didn't think necessarily I wanted to practice law, and
You didn't from the beginning.
I didn't know. I didn't go there because I had this deep passion for practicing law. I went there because it seemed kind of like a typical course path that I could take. And, in between college and law school, I went to France for a year. I taught English in France for a year, so I actually deferred.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it was really nothing more than that.
Right. Because I always say that whether you become an attorney or not, it is a tremendous education that you can apply to so many different parts of the world.
Correct. I mean, I would say going through it, I didn't have that mindset,
Mm-hmm.
but looking back, I 100% agree.
Right. Because you and I have conversations all the time, and a lot of them are legally based or corporate structurally based, and you didn't have to learn that later in life.
Mm-hmm.
You said like, oh yeah, I remember my contracts class, or I remember my real property class or something like that. And so you had that basis already.
Yeah, I had that basis. I know I'm getting ahead, but when I did make the jump into real estate, I felt comfortable reviewing letters of intent, purchase and sale, leases, getting very detail oriented in those things, going through rezonings.
Mm-hmm.
So as it turned out, it was a good background for me.
And then you jumped ahead and you said you became a lawyer.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
You took the bar. Where did you take the bar?
I took the bar in Pennsylvania
Okay.
initially. So I
Yep.
took the bar in Pennsylvania. I practiced corporate and securities law there for like 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I transferred within Drinker Biddle to their New York office. And I worked there for 2 years, took the New York bar. And so I practiced law for 4 years.
Was it enough to make you say that you didn't want to be a lawyer?
Yes.
Isn't
Honestly,
that interesting?
I knew,
That's so interesting to me. You're not alone, by the way. Right.
I'm not alone. Oh,
Right.
I'm a dime a dozen. Also, in a New Yorker coming to Florida, I'm a dime a dozen.
It's not your fault. It just happens.
It just happens. But it made it all worse because I officially moved here in 2021, where literally every other New Yorker is moving here. But I had like a well thought out plan from 2017
that no one believes.
And part of that plan was not like housing prices going like crazy and everyone from New York following me.
Right.
And no one believes it.
Because when you and I first met, you were here to kind of start your company, start your business, and you were really just grassroots, driving around, looking for land. And we'll get more into that. But you're like, oh, it's so affordable here, and look how great lifestyle this is. Mm-hmm. And you're going back and forth because you had a significant other.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. So it was funny. Yeah. So I practiced law for 4 years, and then honestly, one day I just stopped. This was more planned out than just stopping, but in essence, I just stopped practicing law. I got on a plane. I flew down to Tampa, and I found a place to live. I subleased a student housing.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. That was the first place I lived for 3 months, was in one of those beds that's attached to a kitchen, and there's other beds. So I had college roommates essentially. I'm 30 years old and I've been practicing law in New York, and now I'm back to 20-year-old with college roommates.
Was there a lot of mac and cheese in your life?
Ramen, mac and
ramen,
cheese.
Right?
Yeah, I'm not a cook, so it was a lot of eating out, ramen, mac and cheese. It was weird. It was a really weird transition to make, and made all the more weird by the housing choice. I only did it because I had a bed and a couch, and I didn't have a place. I didn't want to buy a bed or a couch because I was, flying back and forth.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was strange.
Most people in those scenarios just go to this little place called IKEA.
Most people, my budget was tight, to say the least. I was trying to save every possible penny I could. Because again, I just come from a salary, which is nice, to no salary and then no real plan. No
potential.
No
for
potential.
Salary.
Like in my head, I saw something at some point, but it's not like I could put it down on a piece of paper. This is how I'm going to make money. Right. So yeah, that's why even IKEA was too expensive for me.
That's great. Right after college, I went to IKEA, and they have this like side back room area for all their like scratch and dent stuff, and I only went in there. Like, all right, that's $90. That's $60. I'll take those two things.
You're taking a step. It's really a step below IKEA. I wish I knew about that place.
Yeah, IKEA rack. Right.
IKEA rack. Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's great. Okay, so you knew you wanted to do real estate, and you skipped over a major portion of your trajectory, which is Tampa. How did you figure Tampa is where you wanted to build your empire?
Empire, wow. I don't know if I go that far, but Tampa came about, so I wanted to make this jump. I knew I didn't want to practice law anymore, and it wasn't going to be in New York that I was going to start developing real estate, that's for sure.
Because Tampa wasn't on a lot of people's radar at that point. It really was a secondary city. People considered it a city, but secondary city. And especially someone from New York, who at the time was the most dynamic real estate market in the world, you choose to go to a secondary city.
Yeah, that's true. At the time, it was still a hot city. So it was a secondary city, but it was still on lists as the top 10, top 5, growing cities in the United States. So I knew it had a good trajectory. But Atlanta was on the list. Dallas was on the list. My wife grew up in Gainesville. Her parents still live in Gainesville. So, it's 2.5 hours from them. So she wanted to come back to Florida. Tampa's a growing city. I know it's a growing city. It just seemed like a logical place, honestly, to start.
Okay, good. You get here, you're living off of someone else's furniture, and and do you have a car?
I have my wife's high school car. Yes. So yeah, I have a car.
And you say, I want to be a developer. So
yes.
That's the big reveal. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I want to be a developer. Now, what do you do?
Now what? So it's land in Tampa. I want to be a developer. I knew what I wanted to develop. So I wanted to develop small commercial retail strip centers.
Okay. That's pretty specific.
Yeah.
How did you get there?
It just, I don't know, I could understand the process, even though I never done it. It just seemed like a manageable process. It seemed like one that I could de-risk, one that I could get financing for, because it was so tenant driven and so lease driven that, so it just seemed like, and it was a place where I could add value versus it'd be more difficult for me. And I had to, make money quicker than, buy a piece of property and let it appreciate and sell it in 5-10 years.
Right. You needed to get the ramen.
Yeah, I need to get ramen.
Right.
Yeah, literally for ramen, for food, for plane tickets.
Right.
So, and development I knew was a way I could add value. If I pulled it off, I could add value. So with that, I kind of knew where I wanted to be. I wanted to be at a lighted intersection on a busy road with good access. So with those parameters, I just started looking on the property appraiser's website or cold calling, driving around, anything I could to find that piece of property.
I don't think a lot of people appreciate that grassroots, I used that word earlier, that grassroots effort that you made and that you continue to make, and what I would say most developers continue to make is literally just finding land or finding an old building and tearing it down. How do you do that?
I mean, it's not a sexy part of real estate,
right.
It really is cold calling. It's being persistent. It's driving to locations and just driving streets. And it's becoming a personal investigator, detective, you know. It's tracking people
creepy.
down. It's creepy. I mean, I've definitely done some creepy things trying to get a hold of people. Things I never know. But there is an aspect to that where it's like, there's a piece of property. The only way for me to get it is to get in contact with this owner. So how do I get in contact with this owner?
Some desperation.
Yeah, desperation.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it was desperation in the sense of, well, if I don't make this work, then I guess I'm going back to be a lawyer, which doesn't sound like a great scenario to me. There's definitely some fear and desperation.
Right. Great way to start a marriage.
Right?
Exactly. That's terrific. So what's your creepiest story? Like, cold calling has been a large part of my life in my early career. And I'd never done it before I got into real estate. And so I didn't even really know what it was. And you refine that skill, you hone that skill over time. And now people just don't pick up their phones, right? If they don't know who you are traditionally. And so like, what was something that you would say to a total stranger when you want to buy their property?
I have a couple things on that. So the first thing I would do, which in retrospect was so weird, was I would send Starbucks gift cards. So my whole thing was like, I got to get them on the phone. Like, how do I do it? So I'd send a $25 Starbucks gift card.
Oh, that's a lot.
Which was a lot.
Yeah.
And I probably sent out, a handful of them. I don't know. And I never got a response back. So then I smartened up and this is horrible. I would send the gift card, but on the back, I would scratch off the code. So I would save the code. And if you save the code, then I can use it. If they don't use it within 2 months, I can go in the Starbucks app and I can use it. So now I'm sending people gift cards. If they don't get back to me, you don't get the $25. You can't use it. So I did that a lot until I realized that there was just zero value. Zero value. And in my letter, I would say, would be great to grab a cup of coffee.
Right. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
A little cheeky, but cool.
A little cheeky.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. But no one wanted to grab that cup of coffee.
Yeah, with a total wacko.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Why is some random person sending me a $25 gift card to Starbucks?
I love that. That's great. All right. So it didn't work.
So that didn't work.
Yeah.
So, I've had to, like, one piece of property, which I really wanted, I ended up not getting, was up by USF, and I could not get a hold of this person. I could not get a hold of the owner. I had gone so far as to going down to the courthouse and polling. The reason I found his attorney, which ultimately was my connection to him, was because he was involved in a domestic violence dispute. And through that, an attorney represented him. And I found the attorney that represented him, which, this is weird, also happened to be the attorney representing him on the piece of property, which made no sense to me. But this was probably 3 months or 4 months of trying to get a hold of him, sending so many letters, going to his house. You know, it was...
Craig, that's a new level of creepy.
It was creepy. It was creepy. And then finding it through a domestic violence dispute.
What did the attorney say?
She was like, how'd you get my number? And I told her how. And she said, well, yes, he is actually looking to sell.
Oh.
And, you know, long story short, I ended up not getting it. It went to Chick-fil-A.
Oh, so you know what you're doing.
Yeah. So I knew it was a great site.
Yeah.
And I always felt with that site, I was like 3 months too short, you know, because he was negotiating with me through the attorney. And then all of a sudden he went dark. And that must have been when Chick-fil-A approached him.
That is very interesting. I mean, if you're a real estate nerd, right? That is very interesting because he didn't know who you were. You're a stranger. And you weren't communicating with him directly, right? The attorney was acting kind of like a broker. Is that true?
More or less, yeah.
Yeah. And so they could never meet you. They could never hear you, you know, see how you talk about things. Would you have gotten to the price that they ultimately sold it for?
I don't think so. I'm happy to share the numbers. I was at like 1.5 million for the site, which also, just to put things in perspective, was way more money than I had.
It's like infinity.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like, I'm just playing Monopoly money right now.
Right. I know that's the number, but I don't have it.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll just roll the dice, see what happens.
Right.
It seemed like it was a number that other people say. So, and then Chick-fil-A came in at 2 million.
So they bought it themselves.
Yeah, corporate bought it.
Okay.
And I only know this through the property appraisers.
Yeah,
Obviously,
right.
Chick-fil-A went there, but
Yeah.
who bought it? I saw it was Chick-fil-A corporate.
Yeah. That's all right. So did you actually feel like, okay, I'm looking for the right things right now? Like I know how to choose a location?
Yeah, I felt like I knew in a location. I knew, you know, I could kind of sense. I mean, again, it wasn't rocket science by any stretch. It was, okay, there's a light here. I can get good access here, and there's a lot of cars here. And, you know, for Tampa, especially with roads, you know, there's a lot of roads that have good traffic. And so I always felt like I was on the right path with what properties I was looking at.
Okay. So what was your first deal when you came to Florida?
So my first deal was on a site just like that. So I'd put a piece of property under contract that was an acre. It was on Brandon Boulevard, State Road 60 out in Brandon, which was
That's like west of Tampa.
West of Tampa.
Right.
The main intersection, or the main commercial road. It was a little bit further east of the mall. So it's east. Sorry, I'm talking about in Brandon. East.
Sorry.
Not the Clearwater one.
Yeah, I got that wrong, so I led you astray there. Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the Brandon one.
This is how everyone who works with me feels every day.
I probably should have just let it go.
Right.
Dave's right. It's west.
Right.
So I put it under contract. So kind of to your point of never meeting that other person that sold the Chick-fil-A, a lot of the ways I found property is meeting that person. You know, the sites I would go after were owner occupied or someone who had mom and pop tenants on it, who had owned it for 30 years. And I really did want to sit down with them because I felt like that was the best way to establish that trust, to, you know, because at the end of the day, they had to believe in me, because why would they put a piece of property under contract for a year or 15, you know, I couldn't do a 30-day close, 60-day close, 90-day close. This was, I'm going to get you the purchase price that you want, but I need the time to put the deal together. So we're going to be partners in this, you know, essentially. So for this 1 acre site, that's what happened. So I met with him multiple occasions. There was a broker involved. I met with the broker multiple occasions, and ended up putting it under contract. I think I had about 15 months to close on it. Going through that process, I ended up getting an extension for 3 months because I had to take it through a variance for some setback. And my plan with that site was to build a strip center on it. So I had a couple LOIs from wing places and fast food chicken restaurants. And that was my plan, was to entitle it for the necessary entitlements, go through a site plan approval, go through civil design, have my tenants in place, and then build it. And while I was going through this process, I was approached by another developer who had a tenant in hand that they wanted to build for. So ultimately, I decided to assign the contract to him. I was given an assignment fee. He was given the property. He built for his tenant. And it ended up being kind of a win-win-win because for my first deal, it was nice to have some money in my pocket, right? Quickly. And not have to wait 2-3 years if I were to sell it.
You went from like ramen to like Olive Garden.
No, not Olive Garden.
Like that was, yeah.
That's nice.
Sizzler or something.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, Fazoli's.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Right. So that was the first time it actually worked.
So it worked. Yeah. I mean, this was a long process. It
Sure.
was from finding the land to tying up the land to assigning the land to closing on the land through the assignment was a 15-month process, I would say, maybe even longer.
Mm-hmm.
But it worked. And, and again, that was a nice kind of kickstart into doing what I was doing. I felt confident that I knew it was a good piece. I knew I tied it up appropriately. And that had I not assigned it, I still felt confident that I could have developed it for these other tenants.
What was the math on deciding to assign it for a profit? You called it an assignment fee. That's a fancy way for profit. Right?
Yeah.
Versus developing it. Like what was your logic there?
At the time I had LOIs from tenants. If I had a lease signed, obviously I wouldn't have assigned it. Mm-hmm. If I had a better anchor tenant, I think it was a risk reward. It was like I felt really good about the property. I have some good LOIs, but if I had a better one, I would have felt more confident in that risk. And again, I still would have gone through it, but at the time it felt okay. I'm balancing kind of a bird in hand with there is risk here, and I still don't have that A+ tenant. So I think I could have made a lot more money had I developed it myself, but it was just that risk reward balance.
What did the original landowners say when you assigned that property? So you didn't do what you originally explained you were going to do.
Honestly, they were happy.
Oh.
That property had been, I'm coming to Tampa. I don't know anything about Tampa. There was, like every property, there was a history.
Right.
This guy had been trying to sell it since 2006. I mean, for a long time.
Yeah.
It was an abandoned gas station. There was a food truck on it.
Yeah.
So, O'Reilly's at one point was looking at it. There was a history here and no one could close. So I think at the end of the day, when someone closed, me or someone else, he was like, great, finally. I could finally sell the property.
That's great. Okay. So you have a few dollars in your pocket and you tell your wife it worked, right?
Yeah.
Like check the account.
we got another 6-month runway here.
But she's still living in New York.
She's still in New York.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for people to know kind of the challenges that you went through, personal challenges that you went through. Is you were just starting your lives together. You're fairly newly married.
We married in 2014.
Yeah.
So 4 or 5 years
Yeah.
ago.
And all of a sudden there's kind of regular disconnection between you so you can build a life for both of you and your subsequent family in a place where you both have never lived before. And you were trying to build properties in a market that you weren't like an insider. You were a true outsider.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
It was tough. It was a constant reassessment, I would say, of where we're at. Again, it's kind of going back to the salary. It was like going from a salary to no salary was a big deal. Now she was working, which was awesome, and she was able to support us. And that's really why at the end of the day I was able to have that 2-3 year runway to really get things going.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was leaving Monday morning. It was coming back Thursday, Friday, whenever day made sense.
Every week.
Yep. So I mean, I say it was both. It was the jump, leaving the job, and the long distance. We had done long distance before. I mean, when I was in law school, she was in New York. So we had done that for 3 years, but nonetheless, it was a huge, it was a huge jump, huge transition.
You said something before where when you assigned that property that you had an opportunity to speak directly to the landowner and generate that relationship. And we have core values at our company. One of them is being relational for so many reasons. I'm just kind of using that word for the purposes of our talk today. How have you found being relational has helped, or I don't know, maybe hurt you in your pursuit to grow your company?
It definitely helped.
Yeah.
Definitely helped. I mean, even that assignment deal came through a relationship, right? So, but for that relationship, I wouldn't have done the assignment. With, again, going back to sellers, the next property that I did, I had not only a great relationship with the people I was buying it from, but the neighbors, because now I'm rezoning the property and I have to get neighbor support. So, it's sitting down and having long conversations with them, and again, gaining that trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. You're going to do that setback. You're going to do that fence, that landscaping. And then now I'm at the point where, I don't necessarily have to. I don't know if I'm at this point, but it's nice when 100% of my business isn't being from, going on the property appraiser's website and finding an intersection and calling that seller. I do have some more relationships where I find a site through a broker or through a relationship or, can partner with somebody.
Yeah. In a fairly short amount of time. 7 years.
7 years, yeah. It's been 7 years.
Yeah. I think that's impactful. And how do you approach these conversations? Like, how do you, say, like, I am Craig. My company name is a made-up word.
That's how I start, yes.
I have no employees, and you should trust me.
Yeah, you nailed it. And they say, where am I signing?
Like, how do those conversations kind of develop?
I would say it's a story.
Yeah.
It's painting a picture of what I'm trying to do. And, again, if you're going back to sitting down with a seller, it's, I'm going to work with you. I want to get you to your number, as long as it makes sense financially for me. And honestly, the only way I can get you to that number is if I have a tenant that can justify that purchase price. And I need the time to do that. So that's typically and that's all the truth. And, that's typically how I'll explain it to a seller. And again, a lot of the people that I'm working with who are selling a piece of property are not REITs. They're not, institutional. They're mom and pop people who have had this land for 20, 30 years. So it's an education in that respect. And it's a year to 18-month relationship with them.
Has anyone ever said to you, you can buy our property, but you got to close in 30 days?
Oh, yeah, all the time. And I just say, I can't. I mean, at the end of the day,
But no one can unless they're just not doing diligence.
Yeah. I mean, usually I'll try and have that explanation that someone can at the right price. Like, if you want to reduce your price in half, I'm sure there's someone out there who can speculatively buy that. But if you're trying to get top dollar commercial value for it, no developer is going to do that without XYZ in place. And, sometimes that resonates, sometimes it doesn't.
And does that cost you anything other than your diligence costs during that diligence period? Like, are you paying the seller anything at all to quote unquote hold that property for you?
So once I sign the contract, usually I'll have some amount of time, 90 days. I try and get 180 days of what's a free look. So that's a time where I can do all the diligence. I can meet with the county. I can order surveys. I can order environmental and decide if I want to continue to pursue it. So once that 90 or 180 day period is up, if I'm feeling good, and by the way, I have to feel good on the tenant side as well. Oh, Chick-fil-A wants to be here, McDonald's wants to be here, then it's okay. I've mitigated the risk somewhat to a point where I feel comfortable having whatever it is non-refundable. So now the seller knows, okay, at least I'm getting something at the end of the day, and that's a negotiated price.
Okay.
And that will buy me another 6 months to do everything I have to do.
Sure. So tell us about your most interesting project that's currently under construction right
now. My most interesting project.
Yes.
So I've been talking about commercial, a lot, and that's what I would call, my bread and butter, so to speak.
Because we like cliches here.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
For those who like cliches, my bread and butter. And that's a big.
When was the last time you had bread and butter?
Long time ago.
Right.
Long time ago.
All right.
True. I'm never using that. So that is what I do most often is in the commercial world.
Right.
But I have started to develop multifamily deals. So the first multifamily deal, which we're hoping to deliver in October, is in downtown Tampa, 8-story, so a mid-rise, 104 units, studio and 1 bedrooms. So we have 84 studios, 21 bedrooms. And it's an interesting project because it's not your typical apartment complex. You think of your typical apartment complex as a parking garage, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, whether it's structured parking or a parking lot, and unfurnished, you think. So I'm building on basically a postage stamp. It's a 1/4 of an acre, and the building takes up the entire property. There's limited parking.
I think you need to emphasize the acreage one more time.
So it's a 1/4 of an acre, yeah. So which is, to do 8 stories, 104 units is a small piece of property,
Right.
Usually you'd have an acre.
Yeah. I hope our listeners mouths have dropped, right? It's unfathomable to comprehend that you're building 8 stories. That's very New York.
Yes, very New York.
Yes.
Very downtown urban core.
Right. This is all we have, and we're going to maximize our usage of this 1/4 acre. And does it take a New Yorker to figure that out in Tampa?
Possibly. A lot of the things I'm doing kind of are from the New York playbook, with limited parking, off-site parking, bike storage, tiny units. Our units are 400 square feet to 550 square feet, with the average one being about 430 square feet. Mm-hmm. So, that's something you'd see in the West Village, probably, not necessarily in Tampa.
Mm-hmm. Except it's new construction and not 100 years old, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it's unique. And then the other thing we're doing is we're furnishing it. It's called semi-furnishing it with Ori.
What?
It's called Ori, O-R-I. Their cloud bed is what we're using. So very cool. Now this is not New York. This is more of an international, phenomenon, I would say. But our bed, so when you walk into one of our studios, it'll be semi-furnished. So you'll have a couch, you have a coffee table, you have a TV, and then you'll have a bed in the ceiling. So you walk into the studio, bed's in the ceiling. Now you want to go to bed, the bed will lower down onto the couch. The back of the couch becomes your headrest. And it's called expandable furniture. So the idea is you're turning a studio into a 1-bedroom. So again, you kind of put all those things together: the parking, the mix of units, the semi-furnishing. I would say it's a unique product for Tampa.
How did that happen?
So it happened. So pre-COVID,
you understand, you can't go from developing strip centers to developing a groundbreaking philosophy on apartments just on a whim.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the natural progression.
No.
So that happened. So we both work out at the same office on the 33rd floor in downtown Tampa. And in my intro, you had alluded to 68% of the time I get this one spot. That one spot has a fantastic view of downtown Tampa.
Best view in the office.
Yeah, best view in the office. And you see in that view Water Street, which is a multi-billion-dollar development, which phase 1 is now complete. So go back to 2019, it was all a parking lot there. There weren't 9 26-story buildings there, but it was happening. You could feel that it was happening, and there were articles about it. So I got the sense that something big was happening in downtown Tampa, and I just wanted to be a small piece of that. And kind of what I did on the commercial side, I did on the apartment side, where I sent out certified letters to, all these different owners, and ended up, getting in contact with this owner who it was owned by a 92-year-old and his cousin who was 86. And they had owned it for 50 years. The negotiation took 12 months. Just to get a purchase and sale. Well, it took 12 months, and then COVID happened, and I put pause on it because the world was ending. Yeah. And then picked it back up, 6 months later. But so that's how it happened. So I put it under contract with the same philosophy as the commercial sites. Is I'm going to see how much time I can get. I have to take it through a site plan approval process. So let me get a year to close on it. And then again, kind of like the commercial sites, which, I mentioned before, the $1.5 million purchase price, how are we going to, we'll just see. We'll see if we can make it work, So that's what I did, and ended up partnering with a fantastic co-developer. So my partner, Landings Real Estate Group, Chris Bijo, they're out of Newport, which is where I grew up. He owns and operates 21 multi-family units, on the East Coast. So, with that side, I knew it was something that I could not develop on my own. I could not get financing for it on my own. You know, I had no story. Like on the commercial side, I had a story. I had no story.
It's called no game.
No game. Yeah. It was like, great, I tied it up. Now there's nothing I can do about it.
Good for you.
Yeah. Great job negotiating a purchase and sale contract.
I think there's one major component of your explanation of the site that you're leaving out, which is not only is it a quarter acre, actually two major components. It's a triangle. It's not a square or rectangle. And it's literally adjacent to the major highway that goes through the middle of downtown Tampa.
True.
So I would say most real estate professionals, principals, brokers would say unsellable property. This is not anything that has any value at all because no one would know how to build on a quarter acre without parking. No one would want to build with the main view being the highway.
Who is stupid enough to do that?
Right. And you came up with a alternative to what was being built kind of surrounding this property, that being small units, partially furnished, and a little more economical.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I also tried to use those negatives as a positive in the sense of typically if you had a quarter of an acre, two of the sides you could not, and it was part of a larger piece of property, which, you know, every piece of property in downtown Tampa is an acre. So if you took a quarter of that, you can't build really on two of the sides because you'd abut another building, theoretically, if a building came up. Versus here, we could actually build on all four sides because we abutted the Selman Expressway, which was public-owned land. So it's a quarter of an acre, yes, but you can really maximize the number of units on the acre because you can have units facing in all directions.
Good. All right. So now you've toured me around the site. So we've been on your roof before,
yes,
which was like super cool. And you're literally looking down at the highway, and there are water views if you kind of like lean out the window a little
on your tippy toes.
Right. But there's a major component to the structure of the deal that you put together that you haven't really disclosed, which is on an opportunity zone. And I don't think a lot of people know about opportunity zones. And if they do know, they're probably not at top of mind these days. It seems to have been a buzzword for several years and not as much anymore. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I mean, the opportunity zone was a big part of this development, I would say. Yeah. So the fact that we're in an op zone, which are specific areas that the governor of each state designates as opportunity zones, and it's geo-fenced, you know, it's by street. If you're on the left side of the street, you're in one. On the right side, you're not in one. And the idea is to gentrify. It's to attract capital to these areas to build development.
Are they deemed blighted?
It's based off of income. So,
I see.
You know, you have to hit certain metrics.
Okay.
And if you hit those metrics, then you have the opportunity to be designated as an opportunity zone. And then again, the governor will, you know, 2018 designate all the different opportunity zones.
Okay.
So everyone knows where all these zones are. And then the benefit is, as an investor, if you buy a piece of property and the money you use to buy that property and build the development comes from long-term capital gains. So that's the first key, is it has to come from your long-term capital gains.
Solely.
So I'll take an example. If you own a stock for $100, it goes up to $200 and you sell it, you take $100 of gain and you put it in an opportunity zone, and you take the $100 of principal and you put it back in your pocket, or you put it back in the stock market.
Tax-free.
Yeah, tax-free.
No taxes. You've deferred capital gains taxes. I'm not saying that right.
So the $100 of long-term capital gain,
right,
you would typically pay the tax today on. That portion gets deferred until the 2026 tax year. So that's one benefit, is time value of money. You defer it, a few years. The big benefit is if you hold the property for 10 years and you sell it at the end of 10 years, typically you would have another long-term gain. And this theoretically, if you've done well with the property, could be a very big long-term gain. And for that, you pay no taxes on.
No taxes.
Zero taxes. So that's really the big benefit of this is if you hit a home run, theoretically, or even if you don't, but it's tax-free.
But your money's locked up for 10 years.
Yep.
And that's to continue or have continuity of investment into these areas that are deemed to be undevelopable.
Yes. The idea is that you're not just going to invest in 2 years, pull out. It's they want you there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you probably could ask the question, downtown Tampa doesn't seem like a place, right?
That's
like,
right.
Downtown
You just
Tampa?
told me about a multi-billion-dollar development, right?
And you know what? I that I can't really speak to. It's an opportunity zone, and
That's right.
it hits the metrics. And and there's an area of St. Pete, not downtown St. Pete, but off of St. Pete,
Mm-hmm.
which is another area that's just, I would say it's providing a stimulus to these areas.
Mm-hmm.
Downtown Tampa would be an example of a place that probably would have been built
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of the opportunity zone.
What's the part of being a merchant developer? Would you consider yourself a merchant developer? Well, you're not really
Not in the
selling.
yeah.
You're not selling.
Not exactly.
You're a build and hold
correct.
because you don't want to eat ramen all the time anymore, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So for being a developing, growing developer, what's the part of your job that's most challenging to you?
I would say being a developer is about putting out fires at the end of the day. So it's hard to say what's the most challenging. It's just about balancing a lot of things. So at the end of the day, I'm trying to push a development in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that, you have 10 different, groups that all need to kind of row in the same direction. So inevitably you have issues. And
Right.
It's kind of like a roller coaster. It's like one day everything's going great and you feel fantastic. And the next day it's like everything's horrible and the world is, collapsing. And then you get through it. And then all of a sudden it's great again. And again, there's not like one thing I can really point to. It's more of just the roller coaster aspect of being a developer.
And how many projects do you have going right now?
I have 3 under construction
Mm-hmm.
and then 2 in permitting.
Okay. What's the goal?
The end goal? I think the end goal is to keep doing what I'm doing. I mean,
That's not an end. That's not an end.
No, the end goal is to keep, I guess you're right. The end goal is to look back and to say, I was able to keep doing what I was doing. I just enjoy the ground up development aspect to it. I enjoy putting all those pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, every day that I'm able to continue to do what I'm doing because it stays successful
Mm-hmm.
is good, because kind of like the roller coaster I was mentioning with each different development, like I'm by no means out of the woods of like it could all come crashing down, and it's not like I can rest on my laurels and say I did it.
Right.
I'm like very much in the thick of it, and every deal is really important, and if a deal goes south, that's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I think more short term in that I just want to keep the train going.
So at the top of our talk, I said that you essentially are a one-man show, and you have contractors everywhere, right? So you're an attorney, but you have counsel. You right? You have a general contractor that you hire. You work with brokers. You have engineers around you. So it's not just you, but for your corporate perspective, it's just you.
Correct. Yeah.
What's the inflection point to have it not be just you?
It's a good question, and it's one that I'm starting to ask.
And the reason I'm asking that is because there's probably people listening to this right now saying, I want to do this. There's people in real estate in different capacities who may want to say, or who may want to do what you're doing, and they'll think they need a big team and tons of money. You need money, but not like tons of money. Clearly, you had no money, right? Right. And so now that you've gotten a track record, you have tangible evidence that you can perform, that you can speak to success, prior success, and ongoing success. When does it get to a point where you're saying like, okay, I need to have a payroll?
I think at any point I think make that jump and just say, let's see if it works, and try and get a team. I think kind of thinking of it more calculated.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, I'm very much on like a deal by deal basis. So I'm finding a deal and I'm working that deal. And if I get to the point, which I hope I do, where I have a tenant that is like, I want you to find me 10 sites and build me 10 sites. And okay, now I have to do 10 sites. Well, I can't on my own do 10 sites, and again, maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. It's all about the track record you talked about and the relationships. And so if I get to that point, then I think it will be a natural transition.
And who is that first hire? What's the title of that person?
I think the title would be just everything I'm doing, but just, for a project.
Craig 2.0.
Yeah, Craig 2.0. Right. I don't think it's like an analyst because it's more than just being an analyst. And I don't think it's a broker.
Right.
I think it's someone who can take a piece of raw land, rezone it and work with the seller, negotiate a purchase and sale contract, rezone it if it needs to be rezoned, take it through site plan approval, and then, close on it, find a tenant, do everything.
Yeah. I love the fact that you're lean and that you are accomplishing a lot with a little. And most people feel like if you're able to put the infrastructure together to build a building, no matter what size it is, you need a giant company. And you don't. You're proving that you don't. So that's really neat. When you go to a cocktail party and someone asks you what you do, what do you say?
I think I say I'm a real estate developer. That's where I start out at and see how they respond.
And then you walk away.
It could be like, that could just be, okay, cool, or interesting. Like, I know about that. You know?
Right.
So yeah, It used to be when I was a lawyer, it was like, I'm a lawyer. And I was like, oh, great, you're a lawyer. I think with real estate development, it's a little bit more interesting, but I don't really go and, to many cocktails. Hey, I'm a real estate developer.
Right. Handing out business cards.
Yeah, exactly. I don't even have a business card, which is dumb, but.
No, it's not. I don't have one either. I have this new app that brings up a QR code.
Yeah.
And then people, take a picture of the QR code and then they have my information after that.
That's smart.
And I can tell you 100% of the time, everyone's like, I'm getting that.
Yeah. In fact, let's talk after this because I want to get that.
That's really great. Craig, I have always been very impressed with you, especially with the very humble beginnings, because that's a true diligent startup story. And most people are scared to do that. There's genuine fear in going into the unknown, especially when it has to do with income and starting a family. And now you have children who are even more motivating for you. Right? They get more expensive, by the way.
Oh, great.
And you're doing what most people would consider some pretty major things by yourself, with your own motivation. And it was important for me to let our listeners know that you just need to start. And that's exactly what you did. You just said, I'm going to do it. And then you struggled for a while and you lived on a couch and you ate the ramen, and now you're buying houses. Now your family is stable and your family is growing and you're building buildings, and not just building buildings, but building buildings that most people couldn't figure out how to build. Those are very challenging assignments that you're doing just because you had a vision.
Oh, I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
Again, I don't feel like I'm at the point where I can sit back and reflect by any stretch, but it's been fun. I mean, there's a big entrepreneurial aspect to it, which I love, and each project has its own, entrepreneurial, it feels like you're starting a company. So I love that part of it. And the risk, I love of it. I'm also a risk taker, but I would like hopefully calculated risk taker. Again, kind of going back to the retail, one aspect I like about the retail is, although it's very risky, if you have that tenant, you just have de-risked it, tremendously. So that again, calculated risk. So
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Good. Craig, thank you so much for joining us. This has been so wonderful for me.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Dave. No, it's been great. Thanks so much.
Thanks.